All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor Kristine Sutherland about life in Italy, her love of the stage, studying in London, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. Kristine, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all the above?
I'm a book reader.
Me too. So when you were growing up, did you have a genre or an author that you leaned towards in terms of books?
My dad's read, I think when I was about 4 or 5, he read White's, is it The Once and Future King? The story of King Arthur. So kind of fantasy and, some science fiction. Obviously, I didn't pick up and continue to read. I was read to up to a
Mm,
certain point, but once I was old enough to be a reader, I really liked science fiction. Life was kind of dreary
mm.
around me. So of course it was like everyone, the great escape to other worlds and other places.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Idaho and I went back there for the first time this past summer, and my gosh, it was as amazing as I remember it. The desert there, the landscape, the then when you head up into the mountains, the pines, the lakes, it's just extraordinary. I feel really lucky. When I was 8, we moved to Kentucky. So that was a real culture shock. But I have a lot of great, great memories of where I grew up.
What was the biggest, I guess, adjustment you had to make when you moved to Kentucky? What was the big culture shock?
The humidity.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I live in South Carolina, so I understand.
Yes. I was like, you're kidding me. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I mean, I'm 8 years old. Life is no longer worth living. I remember stepping off the plane, and those were the days where you just stepped off the plane and went down the staircase. And I remember just standing there at the opening of the plane and feeling it hit me and
Mm.
going, this is not going to go well.
So you went to high school and everything in Kentucky then?
Yeah, I did. I did. And then I went to drama school in London. I got out, you know, the only good thing I can say about Kentucky, and it's a beautiful state, and there are many beautiful people from there. But for me, it was just, I miss the mountains. I didn't feel a part of because the Southern culture is so different than the Western culture. It made me want to get out,
Mm.
because I wasn't interested in football, which is, a big, big part of the culture. So it was like, okay, I don't think I belong here. Where do I need to go?
Right.
Uh, my father was a real Anglophile, so I went to drama school in London, and that was fantastic. And then I moved from there to New York. So it was good in the sense that if I'd stayed in Idaho, I don't know that I would have ever gotten out or left, or certainly wouldn't have had the life I've had, for which I'm very grateful. So,
I can imagine that the move from Kentucky to London was equally as big as a culture shock as Idaho to Kentucky.
it's strangely, it didn't feel like a culture shock at all.
Mm.
I felt like I belonged there. Sometimes they're just city and places where you go, I was born to be here, and I still feel that way. I love being in London. I feel completely at home there. So, no, the biggest culture shock was actually Idaho to Kentucky.
So, just sticking with your childhood for a bit, well, when you think back to formative films and TV shows that you grew up on, what comes to mind?
Well, we weren't allowed to watch. We could only
Wow.
watch 3 hours of TV a week, and that was through high school.
That's probably a
My
good thing.
parents, yeah, my parents were not TV people, and they rarely went to films. So I can't even remember what films that we went to. I remember a film of the Snow Queen back when I was like 5 or 6, but I've never been able to figure out. And I've done some research. I have to go back and research it again. Um, what Snow Queen it would have been. I can't pin down a Snow Queen to that time frame, but I remember that. That was amazing. I loved reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was old enough to be reading on my own. I loved that. And so the TV shows that I chose to watch for my 3 or 4 hours was The Man from Uncle, which I loved, The Bionic Man, and I think we watched Walt Disney on Sunday evenings. Yeah, yeah. But to this day, I don't really watch television. I mean,
Like I
now
said,
that stuff
yeah.
is streaming, I'll occasionally check in on something that sounds like it would be really interesting. And I know there's so much more out there that I don't see, but I'm a reader and I love to read. And I don't want to give that up. And then I read on my iPad or my Kindle from the public library, which I just love. But then there's always a certain amount of pressure that like keeps you going because you check it out, you got 21 days to read it, you know?
I didn't even know
And
you could do that on your iPad or your Kindle.
oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. The public libraries do that now. And you can also get some of them provide Canopy, which has great documentaries on it, and the Criterion film collection is on that. But I
Wow.
really do the books, and if you like books on tape, they have adapted to that. But you go through and you put books on hold. So like, I'll read about a book in an article or something, or I'll hear about it from a friend. So I go put it on hold. And then you have to juggle all the hold, you know? Like one came in today and it was like, okay, 21 days, but I gotta finish. I'm
Yeah.
reading uh Slow Horses.
Who's the author on that one?
Oh gosh, I can't remember his name, but have you seen it on Apple TV?
I haven't.
That's one of
No.
those things that I'm watching. It's a great, I always loved M15 British spy stuff. And yeah, so detective and a particularly Italian detective television series I watch in Italian. I have very eclectic tastes.
Would you say that music was big in your household growing up? Did you play an instrument or anything along those lines?
No, classical music was in my house, but no contemporary music at all.
Gotcha.
I like silence and I like reading.
I'm with you.
I'm
I'm right
really
with you.
old-fashioned.
I'm gonna have to check out the Kindle thing you were talking about, but the collector part of me always wants the physical book. I'm just a stickler for it.
Yeah, I think I travel so much and I spend so much time away that carting books around just isn't. And then I'm very short-sighted. So if I take my glasses off to read, which is what I've always done, then I have to hold the book at like 6 inches from my face.
Yeah.
And holding a hardcover book, like I totally get it. It's just that I can't hold it up. And so I read in bed on my side and then I can just like touch the page until I
Yeah.
need to roll over to the other side. So it's really more a it's a technical problem.
Yeah.
But I totally get it. My daughter doesn't read. She only reads books, hardcover books.
So, Christine, this is a question I like to ask everyone. And take it whichever
Okay.
direction you want to go with it. What scared you as a kid?
What didn't?
Good answer.
What didn't? Yeah. Actually there was a squirrel that got run over on the street in front of us when I was about 4 years old. And I think I probably had a touch of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, because I would sort of create fearful things, and I just became terrified that if there was a dip in the covers, that dead squirrel would be there. So I, go to sleep holding the covers up, but I was anxious. I was a really anxious kid. I was anxious about everything. The only safe place seemed like my closet. So I spent a lot of time in my closet.
Did you have pets?
We had a dog named Trixie. Isn't that sad? But it was a long time ago. My mother gave it this name. It was a little dachshund and it was so, so sweet.
I have a dachshund myself right now. His name is Romeo.
Oh, yeah. They can be so affectionate.
It's a
They're
very apt
really,
name for him.
yeah, they're an underrated breed, I think. Yeah, so somebody broke into our house on Christmas Eve. They were, drunk and they stumbled around and they came through the glass of our back door and there was a fire going in the fireplace. I think we were at like, Christmas Eve service or something. And we came back and the dog had climbed on top of this guy and was sleeping on top of him. So he's a really sweet dog.
That's the guard dog.
Yeah.
So, would you classify yourself as a theater kid growing up?
As a theater kid?
Hmm.
No, not at all. Not at all. I didn't discover theater until I was in high school. And I had a friend who wanted desperately to try out for the high school musical. And the great thing when you're really anxious is having somebody around you who's more anxious than you are
Yeah.
because it makes you brave.
Yeah.
You think, well, I'm not that anxious. I can take care of you. So I took her to the audition and auditioned myself and got the part of Meg in Brigadoon. And I was the most fun I'd ever had in my life, pretending to be somebody else, somebody who had more courage, somebody who could do things I didn't feel like I could do. And I think that's what attracted me initially to the theater was the make believe
Yeah.
and the make believe allowing you to be different than you were and in doing that you discovered those parts of yourself and you could then claim them as yours and integrate them back into your life. And then of course as I got older, um I fell in love with theater. It was amazing going to drama school in London because I saw so many amazing productions um, by a lot of older actors who, are long gone, and I feel so grateful to have seen them in person. Uh, but I came to realize that the universalness of our experiences as people and as human beings. And when you go to the theater, you can just be transported by these stories that make you think about life in a way that you never had before. Some of those images, I can't remember the name of the play, but there was this play that I saw at the National Theater. And I think I was either there living in London the first year that the National Theater opened, right by the Thames, or perhaps it was the second year, but it was brand new. There was there was nothing there yet. Now it's completely different. And I saw a play about, I'm probably digressing here too much, but I saw a play about it was a German country town, and this girl just wanted to get out. And, it was very provincial. It was set, I don't know, back in the 20s, the 30s. And nothing goes her way. And there's this moment where she just gives in and she's going to marry the butcher's son. And he's this big guy, as butchers often are because they're wrangling with, like, cows and things
Yeah.
like that. And she just collapsed. And I felt that sense of being trapped. You know,
Yeah.
I think maybe for a lot of us, not all of us, but for certain kinds of us, we broke out of where we started and the families we were born into and wanted to get out. And I got out. I'm so grateful for that. I found who I was and where I belonged and all of that. Not that I don't, love my family and the people that I knew then, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And that image of her just collapsing in his arms of complete and utter defeat and just giving in to what she couldn't have. And I carry around all kinds of those moments in my body from going to the theater. No, I mean, like you see your mother in some character, and suddenly you can see your mother as a human being instead of your mother, and think about, I can take that play and think about my mother trying to get out
Yeah.
of where she was trapped. So I love the theater for that.
That play that you're referencing, would you consider that your eureka moment? You're like, hey, that's something that I want to do for my rest of my life.
No, I was already in drama
Okay,
school.
okay,
Yeah, when I saw it, but that's where I really had my exposure to the theater was that year that I studied in London, and then of course going to New York. But that was my first real exposure to going to theater as an audience member. And I was a big fan of Buffy, and so was the crew and the cast, but the crew, because we would have these. I think the show maybe played on a Tuesday night when it first ran. And we often weren't home in time to see it, especially the crew, because they often had families. So they lived, you know, half an hour to an hour drive before they got home. So they would wheel the television set in on wheels. Of course, it was like, 2 feet deep at the time. It was unbelievable. And they would bring it into like the room where they had all the tables set up and we ate lunch. So you'd pick up your food from craft service truck outside, and then you'd come in and sit at these tables. And everybody, they'd darken the room and nobody would talk and everybody would just watch the show. And
wow,
yeah, and it became something else, because you're involved in all these little pieces of it. That's the amazing thing. In the theater, things exist night to night in real time. And the audience is part of that, who had a cold or who coughed in the front row or who had a fight with their wife before they came. It's this ephemeral moment where an audience and a cast come together, and it's in real time. The a television show or a film, it's just these little tiny, tiny bits. And
right.
each person has their own little bit that they do and that they're responsible for. So when you put the whole thing together, even the people who've made it, probably not the people in the editing room or the director, have ever really seen it before. So, we were all just transported as Buffy fans as well as making it. So that was really special.
Wow. So post high school, how did your first time on stage as a performer go? Do you remember it going smoothly? Was there some hiccups? Anything like
Oh, I
that?
went pretty smoothly.
Was stage fright never an issue for you?
It was.
Mm,
Yeah, it really was. By the time I was getting close to 30, I just realized that it was so debilitating, the anxiety, that it wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it. I would just be dying and then I'd go on stage and I never, occasionally I did, but for too much of the time I felt like I was flying. I wasn't solidly there because I was too anxious. And then you go out afterwards and you've got like a couple of hours of relief. And then you go to bed and then you get up and you realize you're going to go on stage again that night. It's just too much for me. And then I started doing commercials in front of the camera. And I thought, oh, I love this. I don't feel nervous here at all. So then it was like, well, I'm going to do the thing where I'm not nervous. That is just as wonderful to me as this other torturous thing. So, so yeah.
do you
But I
think?
understand the draw of the stage. I mean, when you
Mm,
can stand there solid as a part of a company, you're really flying. But I I was just as excited about doing work in front of the camera. So
do you think it was the live audience aspect that caused you so much anxiety?
yeah, there was no. Yeah, and it does a lot of people. I mean, a lot of actors, I think a lot more than people even can imagine, leave the theater because they can't take the anxiety of it. They have a, oh, sorry, they have a word for it in, is it called? A curl up.
Mm.
That's what they call it in England, is a curl up. And
I've
it's
never heard that
basically,
term before.
yeah, it's pretty perfect. It's pretty perfect. And I think, and as actors get older, it gets worse. So I have no regrets about, I'm still a great fan of the theater, but I have no regrets about choosing a slightly different path.
So, speaking with actors over the years, I'm a non actor, so it just seems like each actor has their own specified method that works for them that they piece together through advice or, just working. So, what is your method?
I think I use different things. I think I grew up at a time above everything, I use the dialogue. I assume that the dialogue is the way in. And in a theater piece, that is certainly true. It isn't always true in a television production, particularly the kinds that were on TV pre-90s, pretty much. Um, the dialogue was often not great, and you were figuring out how in the world do I put this in my mouth, and you were rewriting it to try to make it better. Fortunately, that was not at all true with the scripts for Buffy. So I felt very confident that I could find my way in through the dialogue.
Just a question I like to ask everyone as well. If you
Mhm.
removed all external, I think I already know your answer to this, but I'm not going to assume. If you remove all external factors like, pay, rehearsal time, what have you, do you have more fun as an actor on stage, screen, or a voice booth, what have you?
I would say film. I would say film.
Why do you think that is?
When I was on stage, I it felt open and kind of naked. There was this huge audience out there. You didn't know what they were going to do, and the stage itself was big, and they were a big dark space, and the lights are on you. And uh, in film, I felt totally held. And even though there were 100 people on the crew, I felt I felt totally supported and protected by those people. Let's not mention the fact that if a take goes wrong, you can redo it. You know,
There's a safety net.
there's a safety net.
Yeah.
Yes. My husband, who's a wonderful actor in the theater, it was so interesting to me because he went to the circus. He was in Italy, and it was one of those little circuses that just go from town to town, the way circuses used to be here in this country. And he just decided to pull up, get out of the car, and go to the circus. And he had to leave because he got so anxious about the acrobats because they didn't have a safety net. And he said,
Yeah.
I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't something. So it's interesting because for him, the theater is a very safe place.
Yeah. Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you land your first professional on-screen role?
I did commercials. And, that's how I paid the bills as I got involved in doing television commercials. I did a lot. And I really enjoyed it. And they're very technical. You have to hit a very specific mark. You have to raise the cup just here, not an inch lower. So I loved like having to fulfill all these technical issues with one side of my brain, while the other side of my brain is just chatting to you about, you know, my headache. And so I got very comfortable being in front of the camera and I really enjoyed myself. So that was my first exposure to acting. And then going from there to, something like Buffy was you already have all the discipline, the commercial and the theater and shooting commercials gives you a lot of discipline
Mm.
of how about how you needing to do what it is that you do or want to do within these limitations of space.
So I know on a commercial you have a director and stuff like that, but if say you're doing a commercial for like a national brand like Coke, does Coke have a representative on
Oh yeah.
set and they're
They
like,
have a
no,
whole
we can't do
committee.
okay.
Oh, they have a whole committee. And that was the other thing is in those days, when you shot something, you didn't always get to see it reviewed. And there were plenty of monitors around because there were so many people on the Coca-Cola committee, um, that I would always like do it and then run over and watch the playback. And it was in the playback that I would discover I just need to raise my chin a quarter of an inch, or I wasn't quite connecting with the audience in that shot. And so getting all that kind of feedback and then getting to go right back and try it again was an incredible learning process for me.
I think 1989 we have Honey We Shrunk the Kids. So when you think back on it, was that a typical audition or a right place, right time situation?
That was right time, right place, right time. I don't know what the hell happened with that. I have no idea because I auditioned for Rick Moranis's wife, which, Marcia went on to play, and I I felt really embarrassed by my audition because, you had to do that thing where you anyway, I thought I was terrible. It was one of those things where you leave and you just go, oh God, oh God, oh God. Okay, I can get up and go on, but really, that was so bad. And then I got a call months later offering me the other role. And when I read the script, I didn't envision that role as physically anyone even close to myself. And I only said yes because how could you say no? But I
Right.
wanted to go, you've surely made a mistake. You have surely made a mistake. So I accepted it and I again I went to the dialogue of which there wasn't that much. And I got down there and I thought, I have no idea who this woman is. Like I can't even I see her as somebody so different than me that I can't even like emulate the person that I think I see in this role. And I got there, and the guy who did the sets said, "Oh, I'm so excited. I want to show you your home." So he took me into the home, and I looked at the house and I looked at the wallpaper, and he started talking to me about how May is a person who just loves flowers. And suddenly I knew who this woman was because of, you talked about what do you use to hold on to? And I said, basically dialogue. In this case, it was the vision of the cinematographer and the set designer,
Wow.
really the set designer, who, the cinematographer, as they would say, who had this artistic vision of what everything would look like. And I got it from him, and they put me in that sweater with all those like flowers on it. And I was like, I got this. I got this. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know who this is supposed to be. So sometimes it can be something like that. I mean, it can also be a pair of shoes that make you walk a certain way, and that walk makes you feel a certain way. And that feeling is the key in. So I'm a big internal, external, and hanging on to the words.
It's slipping my mind right now. I spoke with an actress recently, and she said that she started with the shoes of every character. I thought that was very interesting. That's
Oh, I'm really delighted to hear that because yeah, I the shoes are big. The shoes are big.
wow. That's cool. Was that your first time working in comedy?
Yeah, I guess it was actually. Well, I had done a lot of comedy in my acting class. I studied with Win Hanman, and so you work on all kinds of things in there that you'd never particularly get to do. But I did a lot of comedy there. But in commercials, I was never um, the comedic one. I was the person who knew everything. just where to go to solve your problem. But my best friend also did commercials, and he was the guy who would end up like hanging chained to a wall upside down, and everybody would laugh at him. So we were very different. But I love comedy, and I love that aspect of Buffy, that kind of smart.
Yeah, there was a lot of comedy in Buffy, really.
Yeah.
Before we get there, what are your memories of Rick Moranis on set?
Oh, he was lovely. He was really lovely. He was a very quiet guy, and he kept to himself, but he was very friendly and funny and lovely. And it was often the four of us, me and Marcia and Rick, and I know his name and it's not coming back to me.
Matt Frewer,
Yes, yes, Matt Brewer.
your
Yeah,
husband
who's
in
also
the.
very funny. We really, I thought our relationship was worked really well.
Yeah, he's a funny actor as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it was the fall of '97 is when Buffy premiered. Did you have? Am I right in saying that you didn't have to audition? That you got called for that?
No, I did audition. It was a
Okay, okay.
very brief audition. I had decided to leave the business. I just didn't like living in LA and I didn't like the whole sort of thing there. So I thought, well, I'll do something else. I don't know what yet, but I think I was thinking a lot about going back to school and doing this or that. So I was working on this letter to my agents to let them know that I was going to sort of bow out. And I went and I cut my hair really short. It's awful. But it was sort of like this, I'm going to reject this person that, I've been with like perfect hair and cut it off short. It was a disaster. And then I get this call for this audition. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not finished writing my letter. I'm not ready to tell them that I'm not going to be auditioning. So I thought, okay, okay, I'll go to this one last audition. Like, who cares? But of course, you always care. You say who cares, but of course you care. And I got the script and I was like, I had maybe 9 words, a three sentence, a 3 word sentence, a 5 word sentence, and a 3 word sentence. I mean, it was just, there was nothing to hang on to as to who this person was. So I just went in and did it as myself.
Mm,
And, I could tell that there was some interest there and that interest had to be in me, not what you could do with the lines, because there was just nothing to really, it was like, oh, good morning, honey, like stuff like that.
yeah.
So I was really kind of surprised. And then they offered me the role. So then I spent like the first year trying to like cover up the fact that I cut all my hair off. And Josh kept saying, I don't like her hair. I liked her hair. Oh, I know what it was. I didn't cut it off until after the audition. And he kept telling the hair person, I liked her hair at the audition. And, because you're not supposed to cut your hair off,
Right.
you know, like that, because you can get in trouble. So I never told anybody, well, it doesn't look the audition because I cut it off.
Did they make you wear a wig or anything, or they just went with your hair
No,
as was?
no. He
Oh,
just kept saying, I don't like her hair.
I've spoken with a lot of your co-stars from Buffy, and nearly all of them say that the first thing that stands out to them when they got their roles or they auditioned was the writing, and just how relatable it was to the generation of that era. Is that something that you agree with?
Oh, totally. Like I sort of set that up earlier by saying, I loved the words, but the words of a TV show were not well written, and that was not at all the case with Buffy. And he insisted that you be word perfect.
Mm,
So I always think that that's a tremendous freedom to to if you have good writing
yeah,
to just stick to the words. So yeah, it was as difficult memorizing it as it was a play, because if you paraphrased something, you heard about it. But yeah, I found the writing to be really incredible, and I feel tremendously blessed to have had that opportunity. It was way ahead of its time.
yeah,
It was unappreciated for what it was by Hollywood, not by the fans, because they came to it through the early stages of the internet and what the internet could offer at that time. And so it was like this secret in a way.
Yeah.
Like if you were on ER at the time, it wasn't a secret. It was a great show, you know? And it was well written. But if you were on Buffy, you were like, we've got this thing over here that is incredible. And and we know it's incredible, but it's not getting the kind of accolades that Hollywood is used to giving out. It was kind of deemed as a kids show, as a teen show, when it was about so much more. And
Relationships at
so,
home.
yeah, yeah. And it has stayed that way forever. And somebody told me, because I hear about this at cons all the time, people who, mothers and fathers who watched it when they were kids who now have their kids watch it. But this was a person who hadn't seen it at all the first time around and was just seeing it now for the first time. And they were like, everything's gone back to like the 90s. So it looks like it's contemporary
It
because
does. We just,
everybody's
yeah.
circled around to that. But it was so smart and it was so funny and it was sassy. And I was and am a big fan. So
You mentioned at the time it was sort of neglected by the Hollywood scene, but when did you have that realization that this was a huge freaking deal, pop culturally wise, to the people who actually watched it? Did you have a moment?
yeah, I think there were some people in the cast who were doing that from the beginning. And I think Josh was. I wasn't. I had a computer and I was doing all kinds of things with it, but I wasn't really on the internet and the chat groups and the various things that were going on back then. So I wasn't very aware of it. But I think it was probably in the third season where I wore the wrong pair of earrings in a scene. And I said, "Oh gosh, no, nobody's going to notice. It's fine." And they went, "Oh no,
They
it'll be all
will.
over the internet tomorrow." I was like, "Really?" They go, "Oh yeah." They watch and they see everything. So I was like, "Oh wow." And that was my first indication that there was these other people out there that we couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
That's been amazing to me because you do it you do it with that group of 100 people where you feel so intimate and so supported and everything. But then to spend the rest of your life going occasionally to places in different parts of the world and meeting those people who were watching the show and connect in that way that you would normally not really get to connect.
Right.
You might see somebody walking down the street and recognize them. Oh my God, I saw so and so today. But to be at a convention or a con and have people come up to you and tell you, like from their heart, what your character meant for their life, often at a really difficult point, because the reference that people have with me is a mom, and often say, "You were the mom I wished I had." And my mom was a single mom and she had a really hard journey. She had a mental illness. And so she did everything she could for me as a mother. I loved her. I have so much respect. She gave everything she had to give me, but I didn't have the mother I always wanted either. So to be able to feel like I was able to be that for somebody else through this part and help them come to terms with their parent's death or their parent doing this or that, because Joyce was herself, but I also realized early on that my role in the show was to be whatever mother might be needed. And so, because I couldn't always reconcile Joyce's actions with who I knew her to be.
Mm.
Like, I would never kicked my daughter out of the house at the end of the second season. but I came to terms with the fact that you saw Joyce through Buffy's eyes mainly and through her friend's eyes. So I I I wasn't just this individual person. I was what those characters, those young people needed me to be for better or for worse. And that's how I reconciled it.
Well
By the
said.
time we got to Dawn coming in, it was like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Got two daughters, got it. No sweat. Yeah, pulled that one on me in a day, but I'm fine. I can go with it.
So, Christine, I wanted to ask you about a guest star that you had on season 2 because I'm a big fan of his work. Is John Ritter?
Yeah.
What memories do you have of working with him?
That's wild that you asked that because I was just thinking of him this
Wow.
morning. He was such a lovely man, and he was kind of the only guest star on
Yeah.
that show. I was
Yeah.
actually trying to think, was there anybody else? I know his kids were really big fans of the show, so I'm not sure how that came to be, but it was he was so lovely and so funny, and everybody just enjoyed his presence so much. And the first scene that I had with him, we were making out. So it was like, hi, nice to meet you. I'm such a fan of your work. And da, da, da. Three's Company was not on my list of my three shows that I could watch, but I did know what I had seen it a few times and I knew how funny he was. So it was so shocking when he died
Yeah.
suddenly of a heart attack. But yeah, he was lovely. Him, like when he had the metal face, I was there when they shot that, and him just going was it was just so funny. It was great. Great.
What was your initial reaction when you learned about Joyce's death in season 5?
I knew I was going to die like 2 years earlier, which was in many ways an incredible gift because I was going to go live in Italy for a year. And I knew that by taking that action, I might not ever come back to the show. So I told Josh what I was planning on doing, and he just kept saying, "But you're coming back. You're coming back." And I went, "Oh, yeah, it's just going to be for a year." He goes, "Oh, good, because I'm going to kill you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Come back so he can kill me." Um, so I knew, and of course, I'm such a, like if you ask me to keep a secret, I keep a secret. So I didn't tell anybody. I think I told my husband and swore him to secrecy. So I knew. And then when I got back, we didn't get the next script until often 2 days before we finished the one that we were working on. So I had no idea when it would come. And then when I got sick, I thought, well, it'll probably be this. And then I got well. So I guess not. And then like bam. So it wasn't a surprise, but of course it's always a surprise.
What are your just thoughts on how it was handled? Did you have any issues with it, or did you think it was a fitting end for the character?
I thought it was an astounding choice for him to make. And I don't have any lines in that episode, but I think it's an amazing, amazing episode.
It is.
And I tell people to watch it, and I go, and trust me, I'm dead in it. So like, I don't have any, I don't have any skin in the game here, but you gotta watch it. It's one of the most amazing episodes on TV.
Yeah, it is. Do you have a personal favorite Joyce moment?
My favorite Joyce moment was at the end of, I think it was Innocence Part One, or was it Part Two, where she comes home, and I think it's the end of Part Two, and Angel is completely shifted. Um, and it's her birthday, and she comes home, and I can see that this was the mother, being the mother that I wanted to have had. And Joyce knows not to say anything and just light the candle and hold her and not ask for details or go into the drama, to let her daughter go what she's going through alone because that's the way it has to be done, and just being there for her physically. And that just really touched me.
Yeah, that's a very good mom scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, did you think that you would still be doing Buffy panels, conventions, and interviews 30 years later?
No. No, but it's really fun. And I love the way that everybody gets together and I mean the fans. And they have the guys in Belgium know the guys in Paris, but they're going to meet at a con in Germany and they have these friendships that they maintain through the internet. And when they gather, it's as much for them to be with each other as it is to be with us. And I love that part of it.
Yeah, it is. It's still the community is still thriving all these years later. So, what would you say is the best acting advice you've received, and who gave it to you?
Oh gosh. I can't think of what it is you're asking for. There might have been some advice, but the thing that comes most to mind was the other actors who try to tell you it's too hard, quit and don't do it. Don't listen to them because it's a passion. It matters how it ends, but there is no alternative.
Mm.
So, but I was always amazed at the actors who would say, don't do this.
Have you ever been starstruck by a coworker?
Not really, I don't think. I'm just one of those people who feels like every person is a person, and I don't tend to get starstruck particularly, although I have been around people who are giants, and I'm just so in awe of their work
Mm.
and being in their presence. But those are mainly theater actors. Like when my husband did, oh my gosh, it takes place in a bar. It's a famous O'Neill play. And Jason Robards. Oh my God, I can't stand it when I can't remember something. But Jason Robards is a giant of the theater, and Jose Quintero, who directed it, and my husband did a play with Jason Robards, and that was amazing, to but he was just a normal person too. So I
Yeah.
was awed by his work, but not like starstruck in the way where you can't talk or anything.
Probably not watching a lot of movies helped you win that later.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. I know it's terrible. I'm the most ignorant person about pop culture. I had to ask somebody after she'd been around for like a number of years. I had to ask a friend of mine. I go, "Can you just tell me who Kim Kardashian is? Hear about her all the time. I have no clue."
You probably could have went without finding out about that
Yes, well, that's what
one.
happens when you're reading books. You don't know what's going through. But yeah.
Most challenging role or project you've worked on? Is there one you all lost sleep over?
And no, because I think if I have when I had to do anything that wasn't in my wheelhouse, I would lose sleep over it because I just didn't feel like I could wrap my mind around being who this person was. Doing a part like Joyce was an exciting challenge because it was based in myself. I was constantly exploring, new aspects of her. So for me, it just kind of comes down to the roles that are a good fit and the ones that I was more successful in, and then the ones where I just honestly felt like I couldn't quite get a handle on it.
A question I like to ask everyone near the end is have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain? Or an odd coincidence, maybe?
Oh, I know there's been a number of odd coincidences, but I don't think I've had a paranormal experience.
That might be a good thing.
Yeah. I've been in places where I've felt so overwhelmed with beauty and love that they felt like deeply spiritual experiences.
Do you consider yourself religious or spiritual along those lines?
I consider myself spiritual. I don't consider myself religious. Being in Italy, in the land of Saint Francis, it's a very sacred space. It was sacred for the Romans. It was sacred for the Syrian monks. It was sacred because St. Francis roamed those hills. It is, and it's an amazingly beautiful place. It's like entering a painting. And there are times when I'm there where I just feel so rich in the friendships and the life that I have there, which is so completely outside of the life that I was, I don't know, supposed to have or would have had. But I left the show that year and I kind of leapt off a cliff and landed in Italy, and had to learn the language and had to forge relationships and had to, before I had adequate language to communicate with people, I had to find different ways to communicate. I had to figure out how to communicate with my eyes, and my heart, and my body. And I built relationships with the people there, um, many of whom are older than I am, of a different generation. And that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And nothing that was like written for me. It was just something I managed to grab in this lifetime by having momentary courage.
Sometimes that's all it takes, just take the
Yeah,
leap.
yeah.
Well, Christine, just to put a bow on this thing, is there anything on the horizon for you? Any cons, any projects, anything you want to share?
I'm going to Paris in the spring for a small um con, and right now I audition for things, but I'm here looking after my grandchildren and just loving that. Their imaginations are so on fire. And come to the end of a day and I've been Santa Claus, I've been Mrs. Santa Claus, I've been the head of the elves, I've been, it's just like imaginary play for the whole day. And so in many ways, it's like acting
Mm.
because I'm working with somebody who's totally living under the imaginary circumstances, and he directs me as to what I'm supposed to say and who I'm supposed to be. And so I've got a director, I got another actor, and so that's, I'm enjoying the heck out of that.
Are your grandkids old enough to enjoy Buffy yet?
No, 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 he's just 3.5.
Okay, for a few more years.
Yeah, yeah, a few more years. A few more years.
Well, Christine, thank you for giving me some of your time. I had a great
Thank
time
you,
chatting with you.
Justin. It was a pleasure.